It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. I had checked out your website before having you on, and I was really fascinated by your story. And as we were saying earlier, you've clearly had a very large portion of your life be devoted, I think, to purposes you care a lot about, especially your work in Haiti. And then seeing that kind of dovetail and flip into the business you're in now. Before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of what you do, I would love to hear more just about that journey and how you kind of found that place in your heart, I guess I'll say, for Haiti and the work you wanted to do there, and just take it away.
Sure. Well, you got it, Chief.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, basically, I spent many years in the corporate world and also entrepreneurial side of things, started businesses, was involved with startups, but also worked for large corporations and did that for quite a while. And there was a lot of things going on in my life that, were just big picture type stuff that just really made me realize that, hey, my focus really should be in a place that really glorifies God,
Sure.
and that's where I was called into ministry. And while I was still working, in fact, I was working at this internet startup. It was a startup. Meg Whitman was on the board of directors, who founded eBay, and some
Right.
other, sort of big name folks, a lot of Harvard MBAs. I don't know why they had me in there, but anyway, um, so it was,
Story of my life. How did I get in this room? Yeah.
yeah. And it was really funny because I knew I had been called into full-time ministry. I'm kind of going, hey, uh, I don't know how to do that. I've never had to, ask people for money and that kind of thing. And I didn't feel
Right.
comfortable doing it. So I said, look, kind of made a deal with God, which you just don't do. But anyway, I got to make a deal with God and just kind of say, all right, give me 1 year at this startup. Okay. And I know it's going to take off. It's going to explode. I'm going to make so much money that I'll never have to ask anybody for money. So, that was kind of like my deal. Give me 1 year, 1 year. And so, start off, thing was going great. I'm watching my stock options, they're going up and up and up and up,
Right.
and I'm just seeing, oh, this is going to be great. I'm so excited about this and all this stuff. And then the internet bubble burst
Mm.
exactly a year to the date that I made that deal with God. And so I kind of said, okay, well, now what, And I think basically what he told me at that point was that, okay, you want to do your way now. I want you to do it my way. And I want you to walk in faith. I don't want you
Sure.
to have to, your faith to be in this big nest egg sitting in the bank. So so I said, all right, well, so I basically sold everything, sold my house, everything, and went into full time ministry. And we started really as so we had sort of a children's ministry that we had 3 CDs, and we traveled around and we did concerts, we did camps, we did all kinds of events. And it was really fun because after corporate life where I'm always gone, I did a lot of stuff, and I worked with Nissan Motor Corp as one of my clients, and so I'm always in Japan, always away. I have kids that are growing up, and I not spending time with them, so I was real bummed about that. And
Right.
so all of a sudden now we got this thing where my family's living in a 34-foot RV, and we're traveling around like the Partridge Family. Now, you probably know who the Partridge Family
I
is. I don't
do.
know the people
I watched
listening.
them as a kid. Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Kind of like the same deal. And except I had a whole band. And so a lot of the musicians would fly into certain locations,
Right.
drummers and people. But so it was amazing. That was amazing time, a real fun time. And while I did it, my kids were kind of growing up on the road. And one child in particular named Ariana, we used to love to do like big events with, we sort of partner with groups like World Vision and
Hmm.
Compassion International and stuff. And so whenever we do that, my daughter would always ask me, and she was like 8 or 9 years old at the time. She said, "Dad, can I work in the booth, at the and hand out the sponsorships when the people sign up?"
Right.
And so they have these little packets with the kid from Uganda or someplace, and one of those kids, it was a little kid from Haiti. And my daughter was having such a good time doing it, and she came over to me later and she goes, Dad, can I sponsor one of them? I want to sponsor one, and I'm going, well, if you do it, you got to take it serious. So you got to
Right.
take part
Sure.
of your allowance, and you've got to be able to help support this kid. She goes, oh, I'll do it. So anyway, so she ended up sponsoring this kid from Haiti, and it just really captured her heart. She learned everything she could about Haiti. She wrote to this kid all the time. It was a real, strong relationship and all this. And she just wanted to know more about Haiti as she found out how impoverished the country was. And she would go onto websites that had like, there were like orphanages where kids were for adoption. And she would literally take a picture of the page and she'd put it in these notebooks, and she was like memorizing the kids of every orphan in Haiti. I mean, just
Wow.
like she was like really into it.
Yeah.
And it just really, took her heart. And one day I saw this little jar of coins sitting on a dresser, and I asked her, I said, what's that for? And she said, well, Dad, I don't know if I really want to tell you, and I think it was kind of like, you're not going to take me serious. And so
Hmm.
I just kind of said, okay, you don't have to tell me. It's not a big deal. But, I figured she's saving for a trip to Disneyland or something like that.
Sure.
Anyway, so finally she kind of broke down. She told me, and she said, okay, Dad, I'm going to build an orphanage, a hospital, a church, a school in Haiti. And so, okay, yeah.
How
She's
old?
like,
How old is she at this point?
now she's like 10. Okay. So
Wow.
yeah, so she's like totally enamored with Haiti, and she's just, just really, she knew this is what, she wanted to do.
What a
And
big-hearted kid, though. I mean,
yeah,
really,
yeah.
that's amazing. Sorry to interrupt. I just love that.
No,
That's
no,
great. Yeah.
no. She's an amazing young lady. I mean, all my kids are wonderful, but she just has a heart to serve and a heart
Sure.
for God and stuff. So we had an opportunity, as I was saying, we toured all around, and it was also internationally too. We had an opportunity to go to Haiti and do concerts at schools and churches, and travel around in Haiti, with our our show, whatever. And so we got to, arrived in Haiti. We came down the tarmac. It actually didn't have a tarmac. They just had a stairway. And as she walked off the stairway onto the runway, she got on her knees and kissed the ground. She goes, Daddy, I'm home. And I just like, my heart just like dropped. And I
Yeah.
said, wow, I mean, you're really serious about this and stuff. And so as we traveled around there, it kind of got a hold of all of our hearts, and we were just like really moved. But I was still, it's still very much, we had a full-time music ministry. We're releasing albums, we're touring, we're doing all this stuff.
Sure.
And so we're flying back home and sitting next to my wife, and my wife says, honey, I think we're heading the wrong way. And I go, really? I go, I'm not hearing it, I'm not hearing it. I don't know, maybe
What
I
about
have a
my
bad
stock options?
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my stock
Yeah.
options. She got it. And so it was like, um, and one by one, each of my kids, just started saying, Daddy, I think this is where we're supposed to be. And and something happened. There was a group
Sure.
of homeless kids that were there that really touched it. They're street kids, and they were aged from 4 to 19, all across the board. And these kids just got a hold of us, and we got a call that they were in trouble, their orphanage. And so we went to our church. We said, hey, this is going on. Is there anything you can do? We can do together, whatever. And they said, yeah, we'll they took a collection, and they said, like, you can fly over there and help these kids. Um, and so we flew over there, and there was this orphanage that they were staying at. Um, Really heart-wrenching story. And
Mm.
we had met, and there was some strange things and some red flags when we were at this orphanage. It
Right.
was run by an American guy, and um, cut a long story short, he was arrested, thrown in jail. He was a pedophile.
Oh
And
gosh. Hmm.
yeah, and so
Man.
these kids were all by themselves. Some of them, as young as 4 years old. And so we just kind of kicked into, we got to do something here, and we just we got one, our translators from the first trip, and we got a big truck, and we loaded all these kids in this truck, and we drive around trying to find a place to put them,
Yeah.
and nobody was going to take them. It was just this crazy thing, and one of our translators was like, our last day, we're trying to help these kids, and he said, yeah, I have this cousin that has this place for sale out in the desert. We drove out there, and it was this big, huge place with big high walls, and it looked like a safe place. And we said, okay, let's do it. And we just started hiring our translators, everybody we knew, that to kind of take care of these kids. And
Yeah.
we bought a bunch of food and supplies and said, look, we'll supply you. We'll get this thing going until we can find, homes for these kids. And so as we're kind of driving back from, dropping these kids off, it was already late at night, and we had to like fly out the next day. And I'm in the back of this big truck by myself. Everybody's sitting in the cab. I'm in the back, and I'm just kind of praying. I'm going, God, show me, I mean, this is crazy. You gotta send somebody to take care of these kids.
What now? Yeah, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I felt the equivalent of a swift kick from God. And he basically gave me a swift kick and said, I did. And I go, oh,
you think it's in the back of this truck, man?
Yeah. Exactly. And so that was it. I knew that's what I had to do. So we went back. We just everything, we sold everything, we gave away the rest of it, and we packed our lives into, I think it was about 15 these big 30-gallon Rubbermaid type
right
bins,
Yeah.
And that was it. And we hopped on a plane, and we flew to Haiti, and we basically started a journey that was probably the most incredible experience of my life. It was the most incredible experience of my life. But for the next 12 years, we were there. We started with a handful of young street boys, and we added a girls' home, and then we added a school and a medical clinic. And I mean, everything that my daughter dreamed of, came to fruition. And,
right.
And so we were there during the earthquake, 2010. I mean, it was just,
wow.
We turned our orphanage into basically a triage center, and to treat people that were, whose houses had collapsed on them and so forth. We've been through, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest things. And during that, there was a lot of media coverage that attracted people to what we were doing, and
right.
CNN did a special documentary, and Oprah Winfrey came and
wow.
did a whole segment on us and stuff, and it was just a series of events. I mean, from day one, there were the guy that was thrown in jail, got out of jail, and then he started bringing all these like thugs over to try to get the kids. And I mean, they'd show up in front of our house, and a little pickup with AK-47s. I mean, just you name it, it happened.
Wow.
My whole family got malaria, all different times, and I got malaria and dengue at the same time. I mean, so yeah. So it was an amazing time. One of the most beautiful times. And during the earthquake, after the earthquake, we were able to build like 300 homes for people. We were able to take care of these kids and other kids, to bring them into our orphanage, and it was an incredible time. And my kids grew up there. My daughter Ariana, she just had her own little ministry. She would go out in the streets and round up kids and bring them in, and she learned the language in about 3 months, and Haitian Creole. All my kids did, and she would have the kids come in, and she would just sit down and talk with them, and she taught them the Bible. She taught them about purity, and I mean, just and then she would she'd just have fun with them. They'd bake things together, or they'd sew things, and we had a whole vocational training part of our ministry there too, where we had all these series of businesses, and we taught the kids. It was a bakery, furniture making. We had internet business. We had jewelry making, and there was one more thing I can't think of it. And each one of them, they could learn, from each of these if they wanted to. But the idea is, in a country where there's 80% unemployment, these kids you know,
Mm.
when you graduate, even if you went to college and you got advanced degrees, there's no guarantee you're going to get a job.
Right.
So we, you know, prepared them, taught them how to be entrepreneurs and how to run these businesses. And our little businesses became sort of the satellites, you know, as we called it, a business incubator. And then they could go back to their village when they're 18 and graduate out of our program and open their own little bakery or open their furniture baking business or whatever it is. And so that, you know, that was a part of, you know, the things that we're doing. And over time, you know, we went through, we had attempted kidnappings. We've had all, you know, all kinds of things that happened during our stay there, a lot of hurricanes and
Right.
things that we just kind of, you know, survived through. But, you know, in the end, as my wife even got cancer there and, you know, again, you know, miraculously she was healed. We did go back to the States for about 9 months
Mm-hmm.
and she was treated, but you know, again, I believe it was God that just healed her. She's never had a reoccurrence or anything from her cancer, and we just went right back to Haiti because that was our home. And
Sure.
as our kids grew older, and you know, they started to go back to the States, you know, for college and what have you, and so we're there, and we'd really never taken a sabbatical, and so we thought, well, you know, we need to take a break,
Maybe
and
just a week. You know, you could just take a week off.
yeah,
Maybe. I know.
that's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
all, yeah. But we you know, with some pressure from our board of directors, they
Right.
basically said, you know, really, you got to take some time off. So we did, and while we were back, we felt it was, you know, God, you know, God was really calling us back to the States. And it
Mm-hmm.
was hard because, I mean, the ministry's still there. It's still going strong. We got other people to replace us and we have a lot of Haitian employees. And so it's you know, it's still going, and it's still very much a part of our hearts
Sure.
and what we do. And, um, but while there, I'm in Haiti. I'm going, okay, I'm going back, and now I'm getting close to 60, and I'm kind of going, you know, what am I going to do? You know, I mean, it's like
Right.
60.
Yeah.
I'm not
Oh,
going to
yeah.
walk around with a
Right.
resume, you know, at 60. What am I
Right.
going to do? You know, I'm going
Yeah.
to end up
Yeah.
with a blue vest on, you know, passing
Right.
out shopping carts at
Exactly.
Walmart, you know. So I'm just kind of, and I'd started business, and I thought, well, it's probably my best, you know, best thing, because I'm not just going to go home and just collect seashells and, you know, kick around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, you know, I like to do things. And so I was just weighing out different options, and we had a whole one of our businesses in Haiti for the kids was this online business, and they were, you know, buying things on Amazon, reselling on eBay, and doing stuff like that. So I you know, I taught the kids how to do it, and they were doing great. And
Right.
so I said, well, hey, let me try this. And I was doing it for a while, and I was going, you know, I was making like $1,000 a week at one point. I was going, this could be a nice little business, you know. But then I got kicked off to eBay because because you know, it was like around Christmas time, I think, and
Right.
Frozen had just come out. It was a really big thing, and we would get these orders, and the people would, you know, you know, sign up for it on eBay,
Right.
and it's supposed to be able to fulfill it on Amazon, but then they would run out of it, and so I'd get all these negative reviews, and it was
Oh,
enough to get
right.
me kicked off. Yeah, you get negative
Yeah.
reviews and you're off of eBay.
Right. Right.
So I go, so much for that business idea. And so I'm weighing out other things. What else could I do? And I got this check in the mail, and you know, I had, like I mentioned, I was in tech, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the internet and software and so forth, and I had a lot of tech stocks and stuff. So I got this, you know, got this check, and I thought, well, I just don't want to put it in there. The market was kind of, at that time, it was pretty volatile,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel comfortable, you know, just throwing everything into stocks. And so I started looking at diversifying. I started looking at what are my options, what can I do. You know, I was looking at annuities. I was looking at all kinds of different options. And but on my board, I had you know, a couple of guys that were in real estate. I had a guy that was a contractor, another guy that was you know, he bought apartment buildings, and another guy was a developer, another type of developer. And I said, you know, maybe I'll just look at real estate. Maybe there's a, you
Sure.
know, I
Yeah.
can kind of passively invest in real estate. So I, you know, I researched, I started reading, you know, I ended up reading, you know, Kiyosaki's book, Rich
Mm-hmm.
Dad, Poor Dad. And then I'm just kind of thinking totally different about, you know, money and investing and all this stuff. And so I, you know, noticed that he had gone in the real estate route and too. And so I just, I started researching, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna buy turnkey. There's something I don't have to do anything.
Right.
You buy a house, it's already rehabbed, there's people in it, there's property management in place. I don't have to do anything. So I go, that sounds easy. So I researched what markets. I'm looking for a good market where, I can get some appreciation on top of the cash flow. My main focus was cash flow, but I
Sure.
was
Yeah.
thinking, get a little appreciation going. That'd be great too. So I looked at some of the hotter markets, and at that time, Memphis and Atlanta were really hot, and
Okay.
found a turnkey company. And I, researched it. I hopped on a plane out of Port-au-Prince, flew to Atlanta, bought a single family house, flew to Memphis, I bought a duplex and a single family house, and then I flew back to Haiti. And next month, boom, money's appearing in my account. I'm going, that's easy. That was really easy.
That was cool. Yeah. Two plane. Wow.
Yeah, that's it. I go, that was really easy. And I go, maybe instead of just, and I was looking at real estate initially, I wanted to diversify really more than anything else. And so I just thought of it as just, okay, I'll just throw it in there like I throw it in gold or whatever, something different. And so I was looking at this, and well, maybe this could be more than that. Maybe that could be my business, that I could do. And so I started researching more and more, and trying to understand what was involved. And one thing really just hit me is, and that was what I call your why, really discovering your why. Why do I want to do this? Why?
Sure.
And because Haiti is still very much top of heart with me and my family, is I thought, well, if I could do something to help the kids over there, even though I'm going to be living in the States, that would be really great. And one of our dreams is to build this village, and for the kids with all of the things that we do, and so I was thinking that'd be really cool if I could do that. So I started looking at just what I was doing and trying to understand it. And I was noticing I paid about the same for all three properties, the duplex, the two single family, they're all about the same price range.
Right.
The difference is if I had a vacancy in the single family homes, I'd have 100% vacancy. But in the duplex, it'd only be a 50% vacancy. And so I thought, that's kind of nice, because at least I'm making something if there's a vacancy. I don't make anything when I have 100% vacancy. And then I thought about it. I thought, okay, I only have one property tax payment, one insurance payment, one roof to deal with. I go, why am I buying single family homes? And that's where I started, looking at, maybe doing another duplex. So I ended up doing that. I found one in Indianapolis, another area that looked promising. So I bought a duplex in Indianapolis. And it just it did really well. I bought it for like $55,000. In about a year's time, it went up to about $200,000 in value. So it was one of these hot areas, near downtown,
Right.
where there's a lot of millennials coming in, that kind of stuff. So it just happened to be in the right place too. So I'm going, this is great, but why am I limiting myself to two? Why don't I get more, a fourplex or,
Sure.
or 6 or 8 or 10, whatever. And so I started researching that, and I noticed that, if you go beyond 4 units, that it becomes commercial at that point. So, up to that point, like 1 to 4 units would be considered residential. It would be, and it's looked at in the same way of buying a single family home. So I was kind of scared of moving into this commercial real estate. That sounds kind of ominous,
Big word. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I'm kind of going, well, what would that be like? And I started researching. And I'm listening to every podcast. I'm on Bigger Pockets. I'm all these different, avenues to educate myself.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm also looking at all these other types of real estate things. I would like watch somebody's video, and before you know it, I'm attending their boot camp, and I'm buying some program, and I'm, so flipping and wholesaling and all these other things I'm looking at, and I've got like my bookshelf is filling up with all these programs that I've been looking at, and I'm kind of going, okay, I got to stay focused. What am I going to do?
Right.
And so that's where I said, okay, I'm going to stay with this multifamily. I'm going to start I'm going to buy a commercial property. So I'm looking at all these different properties, and I come across this one property in Indianapolis, and it's 22 units.
Okay.
And so it's a little bigger than a duplex, and it's kind of
Right.
a big jump from a duplex to that. So I'm really, I'm looking at it, it doesn't cost hardly anything. I mean, I couldn't even buy a house in California for what this they was selling for. And I was going, gee whiz, this is, this seems too good to be
I
true.
was
And
going to say
so,
that's starting to sound suspect to me.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm doing my research, and I'm looking at the property. It's looking really good. The numbers were making sense. Everything was working. And I'm going, okay, this is really, really good. But this whole process took me about 3 months from when I first saw the property on loopnet.com
Right.
to when I, decided, okay, I'm going to jump all in. And, and it's sort of analysis paralysis. I just kept, I never knew enough. I wanted to keep
Oh,
studying and,
sure. Yeah.
doing all the research. And then finally I said, look, you're going to do it or you're not, and I said, okay, I'm just going to do it. So I went ahead and contacted the broker that was selling it. And I said, I want to buy it. I sent an LOI, letter of intent.
Mm-hmm.
And, he got back to me and he said, it's just went under contract. And I go, oh, no. After I did all this research on this one property,
Right.
I knew it inside out. And I thought it was, I just couldn't believe it. And I was just so bummed out. And I just said, but after I got off the phone with him, I just said, heck, I'm just going to call him back. And I called him back and I said, look, I know it's already under contract and somebody else is buying it, but if perchance anything goes wrong, I'll buy it from you. Okay, boom.
Right. Right.
No questions asked. And it was kind of a dumb thing to say. Obviously, you want to have an inspection and do things, right? But
it sounded
anyway,
it sounded great at the time, though. I'm sure
everybody was really good. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, about 2 months later, a little more than 2 months later, I get a call back from this guy. And now I'm looking at other properties already, and kind of looking at my next purchase. And he says, it fell through. If you're still interested, I'll take you up on your offer. And I go, oh, cool. Okay, great. Now I have to buy it. And so I went into it. I had an inspector come in, found, a few things. I was able to reduce the price even more. First, I actually came in under market from what he was selling it for.
Right.
And then I came in, and initially said, like maybe 20% less. I ended up getting it down to about 30, almost 40% off, just really brought it down a lot.
Man.
And they went for it. And so here I bought this 22 unit. That's basically what happened is boom, it's kind of my foray into real estate investing. Here I am, 60 years old. I'm committed to doing this. I set a goal right before I bought the 22 unit of I wanted to get 1,000 doors. Okay, so that could be like a single family home would be 1 door,
right.
or 22 apartment would be 22 doors. But my goal is to set 1,000 doors. Okay, within 6 years. Okay, and then I set this about 6 years ago, and the goal was, it was 1,000 by 2020. So that was my goal, and my goal was if I keep doubling the number I buy each year, that I will be able to make that goal.
Sure.
So that's what I set out to do back then, and today, okay, here it is. It's not quite the end of 2020, but I have 924 doors. And I haven't quite reached, but we have a possibility of having one more property we may close before the end of the year. So
I need to let you go. I mean, you don't have time for this, you got doors to buy, man.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's happened. Now, in that process, there were a lot of things that happened. One of which is, as I was doing this, when I first bought the first ones, still in Haiti, I had friends that were asking me. Some of them were fellow missionaries, some were people back in the States that knew me. They were about my age,
Right.
baby boomers, people kind of in that age group. And they're asking all about it. What's happening? How the house is going? Are you still making money? Are you still,
Sure.
And they would ask me all these things. And before you know it, it got really kind of convoluted trying to communicate with everybody, and also trying to learn this whole new area I knew nothing about, at all.
Right.
And I said, look, I'm going to do a blog, okay, and I'm going to share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to be really open on it, but you guys can all come and check it out, and then if you have questions, you can ask me, and that way I could kind of filter a little bit of the information.
Right.
And then I also took on a mentor. As I started to realize, even though I'd studied and read a lot of books and done everything I could, I really needed some help, some hand holding. And so I took on a mentor, and the mentor, one of the first things he told me, he said, you got to get a podcast. I said, oh man, I don't want to do a podcast,
Right.
And I go, I mean, it's kind of like the radio, and like I got a face for radio,
Right. Right.
So I
Right.
figured, well, maybe I could just, it wouldn't be so bad. But yeah, I stutter, I say, all these things, and I'm just not a radio guy. So I was kind of kicking and screaming. He said, do it, and I did it, and it really made a difference. It made a huge difference, especially as I started to get into larger and larger properties, because I loved the advice given to me by the mentor, but I could have guys on my show that were like some of the biggest real estate investors in the country,
Sure.
and but I wouldn't have been able to do that before. But now I have a podcast on real estate investing. I could have people come in, and I could connect with them and make maybe
Right.
make friends with people, and it turned out to be just fantastic. I mean, time consuming, as very time
Oh,
consuming,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
but it was great. And then sort of a reciprocal part of it is that as I got larger and into larger and more units, I had to syndicate the properties, because there's it would have taken a long time to wait for my property to appreciate, and
Right.
then to
Right.
kind of do it like that. Because us old dogs, start later in life, we have a kind of a different plan than the
Right.
millennial that's starting out in real estate investing. So everything's a little bit different. And so this helped me to, learning about syndication allowed me to bring other investors in on some of these deals, and to be able to generate income from as well. So if I had friends that were maybe passive, I don't want to deal with the headaches of, being a landlord.
Right. Right.
But they do want, they want it, the great returns that you get from real estate. Plus, real estate's tangible.
Mm-hmm.
All of my other investments were in these stocks, and so many of these companies, I'd seen over the years would just disappear,
Yeah.
and but the real estate is not going anywhere, and it's solid. It's a good, secure thing to invest in. So, that made it really attractive to investors as well. So I had investors that came to me through the podcast, as well as expertise, and people that I could partner with too,
Right.
in the process. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell, as kind of where I am today.
Sure.
I am, and kind of how I got there.
Yeah. Well, I think, and there's a lot. Obviously, you had a very typical path to real estate. I think most people, have the same story you do before they get into real estate. They do mission work in Haiti, wonder what they're going to do with the rest of their life. And real estate's the obvious answer, right? But yeah, I think, something that I find so interesting about real estate in particular, and you are such a great example of it as a business, as a way to make a living, is just there are as many different ways to be in real estate as there are people and approaches, circumstances, needs. In that story of you kind of saying, hey, I'm at a point where I feel like we're being called to go back to the States. I'm a little further along in the journey of my life. hey, what am I going to go do? You know, real estate provided you with that flexibility to dive into the education, figure out which pieces you like. And then all of a sudden you have this mathematics moment where you go, well, wait a minute, if I got one property and 4 doors, that's a much nicer risk profile than one property, 1 door, in case like it, and that to me is one of the things I really enjoy about hearing about the real estate space. And I guess for people listening, and the focus of this podcast is to help folks understand. It's easy to hear things like, I flip, or I own a design agency, or I own a limousine and driver shop. But understanding how you make the money, I think, is something that's really helpful for people to hear. And it's one of the things in real estate that's super interesting, because if I go to a party and, hey, what are you into? I'm a real estate developer. I'm a real estate owner. Well, that doesn't tell me anything about how you make money, because there's a million different ways to make money doing that. So tell me a little bit, as you build your portfolio, people are going to hear 1,000 doors and go, geez, this guy must be making $1 million a month. But not really. And how is it that you are generating cash flow? And you've talked about that. I'm at a point in my life where I need to realize my capitalization now. I'm not going to wait for 20 years of appreciation. So I'm going to syndicate this. Talk a little bit about the mechanics of that, so that people can get a better feel of the nuts and bolts.
Sure. No, great question. Yeah. That to me is, is sort of the pinnacle of this too, is that, I went in pretty naive, and and I could I could share a lot of horror stories that just it's just part of the education process. And I really realized now, I look back and I say that really, more than anything else, the real education started when I signed that that first set of escrow papers, or I purchased that first property, because that really is where it begins. When you take the step, which is the hardest part for most people, is actually just buying that first property. And you do have to look at it, and it's really all about the numbers. That is really key. And one of the things that I figured out when I first started this was that I talked to a lot of other real estate investors, many that have been on my show, and many through biggerpockets.com and some of these other, portals where you can connect with a lot of other people, and also meetings, RIA meetings, and things like this. And that gave me a feel for what other people were encountering. And I was seeing that, a lot of things I was going through was not unique, that most people had been there, done that, the whole tenants, toilets, and trash routine.
Right.
And so I kind of knew what was going on. And I kind of discovered too, that if you have a property and you have a mortgage on it, generally, rule of thumb, excuse me, rule of thumb, and there's a lot of rule of thumbs in real estate, but that's one of the ones, is that you generally, if you have all these expenses, and then you have your mortgage payment, and your mortgage payment is, includes your property insurance and your your insurance, right? So that's kind of a part of that mortgage. They escrow those the fees for those are like your big ticket items, your mortgage, your insurance, and your taxes.
Just like with a house. Yeah. Just like you own your own home. Yeah, same deal. Yeah.
And that's one thing that makes it really appealing. And that, to be honest with you, that was one of the things that attracted me to it, is like, I bought a house before. I know what that's like, and that's what you're doing. You're just buying houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this new little element called landlording. Yeah, that's a whole different ballpark. But buying the house is easy, that's easy. But then you have, now you have tenants. And so what's a good tenant? What's a not so good tenant? It's great if you get a tenant and they pay their rent. That's good, because that covers, that pays for the mortgage, right? And it pays for the other, the insurance and property tax. But then you're setting some aside too for capital expenditures, like the roof you're gonna have to replace one time, somewhere down the road. The water heater, so you've got your capital expenditures, but then you have your other just ongoing costs, or sort of your wear and tear. What happens if that tenant leaves? Maybe they just rent it for a year. Then all of a sudden you're like, I got to get a new tenant. But before you get a new tenant, you've got to go in there. You've either got to clean those carpets, if you have carpets. And now most of my places, I've gotten rid of carpets, and everything's vinyl planking,
Right.
but you have to do the carpets, then you got to paint, and so that kind of adds up to a few dollars there. And so you really don't want tenants to leave. That's kind of the
Sure. Oh,
deal,
interesting.
because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because once they're there, you generally don't hear from them unless there's a clogged, sink or toilet or whatever,
Right.
and or something goes wrong. But most tenants, if they're good tenants, they take care of the house like it's their own, and
Hmm.
that's what you want. That's sort of the ideal situation, and you very rarely have to do much. And so the longer you own that property, the more you actually get out of it in terms of cash flow.
Right.
Um, if you have to, for example, have to do that turnover every year, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, an example being is like if you had to put new carpet in, that could be like about $1,200. If you have to paint, maybe another 1,200 something. So
Right.
you're already like up to like $2,400 right there, um, and and then you have to kind of look at, okay, what was my cash flow? Okay, and this is the one of the rule of thumbs I was getting at, is that you kind of estimate after expenses that you're going to have at least $100 left. Now, most of us usually do better than that. Most of it'll be two or
Right.
$300. But rule of thumb, if you got 100, okay, you're okay. At least you're
Right.
positive, right?
Right.
It's not a
Right.
negative 100. But can you imagine that? Okay, so that's my cash flow for the year would be $1,200. Okay, if I have to do that turnaround and I got to replace the carpet and paint, all of a sudden you know my
Yeah.
cash flow is gone
Right.
for that time. So there's this process of finding that ideal tenant that's going to stay at least for 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
um, and what's the profile of that type of tenant, and also one that won't destroy the place too.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Those tenants too, the tenants from hell, as they call them, but they,
Right.
that are
Yeah.
really bad news. But so you've got this little juggling. You're always trying to increase that cash flow amount. So um, most landlords will increase their rent, maybe 3% a year, maybe
Hmm.
6%, depending on the area, depending on market conditions and so forth. So if you have a long-term tenant, your cash flow, you're increasing rents, it goes up and up. In the meantime, your tenant's paying down your mortgage. So your equity is going up in the property. So you have that's what I call sort of the bonus part.
Hmm.
That's the for those that are leveraging properties, then you increase your equity, then you can borrow to buy more properties. For some of us that would rather just pay off our properties, then that becomes maybe the legacy you hand down to your children, when you
Right.
pass away or something. So but yeah, so you're making your money off of that difference. And there are multiple sort of income avenues. Like with multifamily, that's another thing that you can, not only do you get that rent, okay, um, but it's looked at, a multifamily property is looked like as a business, okay? When you assess the value of it, you have to look at your profit and loss. And
Right.
that's what the bank looks at to assess the value of it. And when you look at a single family home, even though it's a rental, they're really, I mean, they really they don't look at the business plan. They look at the comps, they
Right.
look around the neighborhood, what a
Right.
home is selling for, just like that. So it's different. And with the appeal of the multifamily is that you can jack that value up by just doing some minor things.
Hmm.
Yeah, for example, you can, everything is cut. You've heard of sort of that 10x rule. Is
Yeah.
it,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like for, if you increase rent $10, it's really worth $100, increase in the value of the property. So
Mm-hmm.
if you increase it 100, it's worth 1,000. And so you when I buy a property, one of the things I look for is, when I look for one that's not too old, that it would have a lot of
Right.
capital expenditures, like you have to replace all the plumbing, replace outdated electrical, things like that. Usually looking at something like 80s and above,
Okay.
that isn't going to require a lot of capital expenditure, because the capital expenditure can also kill that cash flow that you've had.
Right.
Like you can be going along, you got your 100 a month or whatever. And again, 100 is low, but I think it's, it's fair. And
Yeah.
so you got your 100 a month, and all of a sudden, boom, your AC, your air conditioner just went out, and you've got to buy a whole new condenser. Boom, there goes your cash flow for the year. So
Right.
it's one of these things where you really have to think it out, and you think long term, unless you're going to flip after a couple of years, which a
Sure.
lot of people do, and
Hmm.
they take all the equity and they go to a bigger property, and you just keep doing that, so you don't have to really deal with it getting too old. Uh, but what you do with a property that's called a value add proposition is that you go into it, you look for, is there something that I can do to improve this property?
Hmm.
Maybe it was built in the 80s and it's just outdated. The countertops, the appliances, these things are, they need to be replaced. So you go into each unit and maybe you spend, five, $8,000, whatever it is, to upgrade. You're doing all this stuff, but now you can ask for more rent,
Right.
okay? Because this is a nicer unit, so you might be able to increase it 100 or 200. When you've done that change, and that 200 or whatever, again, if you times 10,
Right.
it
It's, yeah,
increases your value that much more. So that's
100%.
that's what a lot of folks will do. They'll go in there, not only that, but then they'll look for other elements. They add a laundry, and then they've got coin operated machines in there, so they're getting income from that.
Hmm.
They have storage, extra storage space, so that apartment dwellers can rent a little storage. And so now all of a sudden you start seeing this income, this monthly income go up and up. Maybe you have a pet policy and they have to pay a extra
Right.
pet amount.
Right.
So it starts to add up. And then when that property is assessed, you may have bought that apartment for, let's say, $1 million. It's not unheard of that in 3 years that could be worth $3 million. If you
Right.
did all the improvements. Again, maybe you went in there and you did not only upgraded the units, but you did the outside of it. You made it look more contemporary. Maybe you added a dog park. Maybe you added some other amenities.
Sure.
All these things. All those things add to the value. And so that's kind of just asking how do you make money from that. That's sort of the main way you do that.
Well, and that's same assets, same thing, real estate. But that's a real different approach than somebody who's purely working on a flipping model,
Right.
where they look into a market and go, what's the supply and demand? Can I purchase this property at X% below market value and turn it around to somebody, whether for long-term occupancy or to do what you're going to do? Whereas, you take that 22 door unit in Indianapolis and you say, hey, eventually I bought this thing at 40% below market. I'm going to put 20% of market value into it in terms of improvements.
Right.
Now I've got 20% equity in the deal before I even open the doors, so to speak. And yet I have increased the value of that property exponentially through the things that you're talking about, right? I've essentially enabled my ability to have the bank look at that as a business, or have future syndication partners look at that as a business and go, ooh, wow, this starts to look really attractive.
Right.
And again, same building, just a totally different approach to working that asset and doing the business. And I would argue the sort of mindset and the way you think about your business is different too, right? Because you're looking at this one property and going, what's the possibility and potential here? Which, dare I make a huge leap? So I used to teach cognitive science.
Oh, wow.
We're gonna go back to, well, what attracted you about Haiti? It was really seeing the potential in people that was unrealized and giving them a theater and a platform in which to go realize it. So now you've taken that basic same psychological personal approach to stuff and gone, hey, wait a minute, I see the potential to get good tenants, good people in
Mhm.
here to give them a better experience, and we all win. So I love that.
Right.
I think that's really fantastic. What right now that you're getting close to the 1,000 mark and really just wasting a lot of time with me, you could have probably bought four more. You could have bought four more doors in the time I've taken here. So what are you really passionate about now, especially in this kind of really weird year as you get close to that huge goal? I mean, that's a big milestone for you. What's going on right now that's got you excited?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. One, it's exciting to move closer to the goal that I set out to do. Yeah, it is different now than I was anticipating it would be. Where I was seeing myself as being the only owner of all these
Right.
different properties. Okay,
Right. Yeah.
very different, very different. Okay, and so I've learned a lot in that process, but but I think that one, I still have my passion for Haiti. My heart, a big chunk of my heart's still there,
Yeah.
and so to be able to help them, be able to do something for them, is just very exciting. I think. Yeah, I think this has been a full-time job for me, literally since I started.
Sure.
And it wasn't passive by any means. I mean, it was very, and part of it, I have the podcast too, granted,
Right.
that
Right.
and the blog, and so that takes a little bit of time. But I think that the just being, sort of tuned into the whole aspect of you know doing this, keep plowing ahead. Now I think I can take a step back a little bit. Now I'm looking at sort of optimizing the properties that I have. um, yeah, Buying more and trying to reach that goal is shifting, so that
Sure.
that that
Yeah.
that's become a little bit different. What I want to do is sort of optimize what I have. What can I do to make that more efficient? What can I do to retain tenants longer? What can
Hmm.
I do to make the tenant love where they live? And that's a big part of it for me, because um, I just I don't want to just be a landlord.
Right.
I mean, I would like it. I would like people to come back to their house and say, "Oh, it's good to be home."
Yeah.
Like you and I probably do. We come back to our house, we're like, it's good to be home.
Oh yeah.
But the that process where and you have a lot of dynamics when you've got tenants. You've got you know two tenants that hate each other, and I didn't have anything to do with that. I
Right.
didn't,
Right.
where did that
Right.
come from? It's like, and how do you deal with that? I mean,
Right. Right.
you have one guy that just, you have your hoarders sometimes that come in,
Sure.
and it's scary. And all of a sudden you're wondering why, cockroaches are coming out from underneath this person's door. I
Oh,
mean,
oof,
so,
yeah.
so you have challenges like that. And I think a lot of it goes back to really understanding people and how to screen tenants too. A lot of it, but you never know. Somebody may look wonderful, and then something goes awry. But so there is that part of it. Just trying to make it's a community. Even though this 22 unit, for example, is in a it sits on its piece of land, but there's
Right.
there's 22 different groups of people living there. And
Right.
so uh, that's a community. And people want to know when they pull in the parking lot that they can say hey to the person they're parking next to, and maybe even chat with them and have a nice conversation. They have to be best friends with them, but they want to feel
Right.
safe, and they want
Yeah.
to
Oh
feel
yeah.
that it's a good place to be. So I think that's kind of where my shift is, and I'm kind of excited about that, actually. We also have a Airbnb business too that we do
Oh wow. Neat.
within
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And so that's also another thing where we're trying to work the bugs out of, and try to make that, because when COVID hit, that was a big hit to our
Oh
Airbnb
yeah.
business. And so
Mm.
that we had to reshift and how we do things there. And we feel like we've kind of recovered, but we're not getting the same rents that we were getting, or the same daily rates that
Right.
we were
Right.
getting before. So
Yeah.
that's something a little different. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that and then there's the big picture stuff that also a big part of it, because I'm talking to not only real estate investors that have a lot at stake, but I'm talking to economists and others that are we're looking at what's going to happen in 2021.
Yeah.
And realistically, it it could be,
We're overdue.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're overdue.
I mean,
Yeah,
everybody's talking
yeah,
about the crash of
yeah,
2021. So,
yeah.
I mean, regardless of who's president, it's going to be something that we're all going to have to deal with. And
Right,
so,
right.
that's going to be the sort of the biggie. And then you got to position yourself, okay, as an owner of apartments, especially. Now, one advantage about being an old dog, and that's why we even have my show called the Old Dogs REI Network, is that
Hmm.
it is a different kind of investing, and so we're
Sure.
much more conservative. We really do less leverage. We do a lot of things. So if you're buying right and you're buying under market, which you should do, I like what you said earlier. You should make money the day you sign that escrow pay.
Yep.
You should have made money. You should have already had extra equity in that, in that purchase. Um, but then as you're moving forward, you don't want to raise rents too rapidly either, because you may have to backtrack on it if the economy goes bad.
Sure.
And so, and if you do backtrack on it, you've got to have enough cushion, okay, to protect yourself. Should you have to reduce rents, or you might have to go down to a 70% occupancy rate. I mean, the reality right now is that there's not enough housing for the people that exist
Right.
as it is,
Yeah.
let alone if people are out of work. I mean, they're
Hmm.
still going to need a place to live. So, but are we going to be able to accommodate those people and still survive, if we have to lower rents? So that's another big picture strategy, and the outlook that we have to have too. So
Well, and it's been a tough piece, and I know this is somewhat controversial. I don't mean to bring it up in that way, but it's been a very hard element of the COVID crisis phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, that you keep seeing these predictions of these waves of people who won't be able to pay their rent, and what does that mean? And it's hard to, every issue is complicated, because if it weren't, we'd have solved it already, right? So
right.
nobody's arguing about indoor plumbing anymore. We're pretty set that that's going to be a good idea. But I think that the rent thing is really hard, because you know everybody's a renter. Okay, they got to pay rent, their jobs. It's like, well, if they start not paying rent, which for perfectly understandable reasons, now you got a whole bunch of people who have notes due on these properties that they've got to pay. I mean, it's a large interconnected web where none of these things are easy. And I think, and then you look at, well, where are you in your financial life? Basically, how old are you? What do you need? What's your time horizon? So all of those things are complicated, and I think thinking about them from the start is a good idea, right? I mean,
Right.
it's that. So how do I think about risk? My wife is a financial advisor and money manager, and when we sit down and look at things, I've been in business for 25 years. This is my fourth business, and
Wow.
she always jokes when we sit down and look at the 3-year, 5-year plan. She says, I'm with my clients, I'm supposed to ask when you're going to retire. I know that's a stupid question for you,
Mm.
but even so, you are always looking at, when do I need to take the cash out? When do I need the capitalization? When do I need cash flow? So I think thinking ahead and saying, hey, what am I going to do when the bottom really drops out? A lot of people started asking that question in March of this
Mhm.
year, and then the market became the market. But yeah, I think it's a smart thing to think about. And I was looking on your podcast, you've got a whole episode up there now that we'll link to from this, talking about, hey, let's look at 2021, what economics is saying, what the economists are saying, and let's see what Biden's stated policies, what effect they might actually have. And I think that's for any business owner, regardless of what space you're in, that's a crucial thing to start thinking about now, to be honest with you. So
I think all of us should be, yeah, whether
yeah,
you're in business or not,
right.
I mean, do you have 6-month reserve sitting aside?
Yep.
Should something happen and your income source be totally cut off?
Right.
For my properties, same thing. I've got to have that for each property. I've got to have
Right.
a backup there. I got a taste of it when we had COVID.
Sure.
We had some unsavory tenants that were in the process of eviction, and boom, all of a sudden there was an eviction moratorium. One person was even a squatter. I mean, somebody that literally,
Oh my
I don't
gosh.
know. Yeah, they got into an apartment, and I wasn't allowed to kick them out, even though they weren't on a lease. I
Right.
mean, it was like crazy, and that was just a taste.
Mm.
Thankfully, on almost all the properties, we didn't really experience a big, a big
Right.
vacancy. We were able to maintain our numbers, but we did have those eviction things, and we got a taste of forbearance on some of our loans too, where we were
Hmm.
able to postpone it because we didn't know what our liquidities was going to be. So
Right.
that was
Yeah.
nice that was there. But
Yeah.
you can imagine with people that have to do that because otherwise they're gonna go bankrupt, or they're gonna have to
Oh, I know.
foreclose.
Yeah.
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 So that's this thing of like forbearance, foreclose. They both start with the same thing. It's like four.
Or a bad four-letter
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Right. It's
Yeah.
a bad
Yeah.
four-letter word. You got it. It starts with it, and so that's that. Getting a sample of that really, kind of slapped me into thinking, gee, this wasn't bad. Really
Yeah.
wasn't bad at all. But what happens when it really is bad? And so we have to gear ourselves. And a lot of investors, I'm saying, I think it's always a good time to buy real estate. I'm not telling people
Sure.
not to buy, but if you want to get a better feel what it's going to look like as an owner, I would wait till after the elections, finalize, and
Hmm.
we'll know what to expect. And so
Sure.
then you can kind of gear yourself for like as you mentioned about their article too, like for example 1031 exchange, which has been a great tool for real estate investors, may just go away in
Right.
2021.
Right.
And that's part of certain people's strategies, that they're going to
Hmm.
be able to do this, and then they're going to upgrade to a new product, take all of that, go in there and not have to pay any capital
Capital gains. Yeah.
gains on it and stuff. So yeah, so you've got to change strategies. There's a lot of thinking that goes into this. So for the most part, that's those are, I mean, big picture stuff is part of it as well, and that I think
Right.
that we can't miss. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's a fascinating thing. I always joke with people, the problem with going into business for yourself is you become unsuited for any employment anywhere after that.
Yeah,
And
it's
on
true.
top of that, you work for a lunatic who's also a workaholic. So,
I hate my boss.
yeah, I mean, I hate that guy. What am I thinking? But and you also, it's the, if you knew starting your business what you were going to know 5 years later, you would never have started it. And yet at the same time, it gives you this, I guess what I would think of as this kind of, terrifying and exhilarating existential freedom where, hey, wow, I operate in an environment where a lot of things have an impact on it. And yet I have a lot of control over my own time and my own destiny. I have, what Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, talks about. I have a lot of entrepreneurial freedom in various ways. And yet I do know a lot of folks who own businesses, and I think now we're seeing a huge wave of people starting businesses as a result of the layoffs, which is exciting, even though it's maybe not for great reasons. It's neat to see people go out on their own, but you want to say to them, hey, take a minute and step back and think about the bigger picture. What do you do? Everything's great when things are booming.
Mhm.
What do you do when they turn south? Because you can plan for that.
Right.
It can be concerning, but it doesn't have to be terrifying. So,
Right.
I think encouraging an audience to sit back and go, okay, well, let's see what happens. We get through this period of uncertainty right now as we're messing around with election results and all that. But, what happens when we come into next year? What happens to the health situation? What happens to the economy? What happens if Bill Gates is right and 50% of business travel goes away? Um,
Right.
Airbnb did a great job through this, right? I mean, they
Mhm.
did a complete refocus of their business. I mean, it was literally the Titanic turning away from the iceberg a half mile out, and they
Right.
crushed it. They did a great job. So,
Mhm.
that's exciting stuff. And I love hearing the way you think about it, right? Because you've got what I would call a very practical, um, I'm just a guy who owns real estate viewpoint, right? This is not, I built shopping malls in Kuala Lumpur, but just, hey, I came to get 1,000 doors in the last 6 years and we're getting close and now I got to think about it. So I think that's really wonderful. Couple of things before I let you go. I thank you so much for all of your time.
Sure.
The two fun questions. Number one, if you could share a meal with any living public figure, who would it be and what would the meal be?
Yeah, I know this one. I'm still pondering that one.
And I'm telling people, just go with your gut. What's your first instinct?
Yeah. Jordan Peterson was the guy I actually picked.
I love Jordan Peterson. Here,
yes,
hold on.
Yeah.
I will. Let me go ahead here. We'll plug Jordan's book. I don't know if we can see it. 12 Rules for Living, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan R. Peterson. There you go.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic guy. And talk about a guy who got into the limelight and that the reaction to him told you a lot about the world. Wonderful, wonderful human being though. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, same here. And I thought, anybody living was, that was kind of the key one.
Right.
Who would be like somebody that'd be so engaging that I wouldn't even really want to speak, kind of thing. And it was Jordan Peterson. I just thought of that. And then as far as what to eat, it's really funny because he's on this weird meat diet or something because of the health problems he was having. I don't know if you heard about that, but he's just like eating a lot of steak and stuff like that.
Okay.
But so I thought, well, I don't know if I would join him on that. I would probably, I'd probably just have like a salad and chicken, chicken salad, maybe, barbecue chicken salad or something like that,
There you go.
And mainly just be there for the conversation. But he definitely would be I think my first choice there. So
and I find he does such a good job of taking what are to me very foundational issues about human psychology and motivation and tying them into, what I would just kind of generally call emotional and spiritual well-being, in a way that I find very, very practical, very no nonsense, and yet very caring at the same time. So I really, I think that's a great choice. And I, for one, would have steak with Jordan Peterson, but that's just me.
I was a vegetarian for like 20 plus years, so I still, somehow, steak doesn't really, I never got back that,
I hear you.
digestive tract or something, but nonetheless, that would, if I could, I would have, but I liked what you said too about him. Cause one of the appeals there is that you could, I got a strictly spiritual discussion. I could talk to him about the economy, the world, world affairs. I could go anywhere with that guy, and he would probably know 5,000 times more than I would know.
Absolutely.
And so that's what, just makes it fun. I'd make it really fun, to do that. But
I love it. Well, and for those listening, and if you haven't had the chance and if you got a bent, I think Peterson's series on really on the Bible and the foundational stories of the Old Testament are absolutely brilliant. And as is his analysis is too cold of a word, but his unpacking and interpretation of, the evolution of what I would call the Central Western Christian worldview from the kind of Old Testament into the New Testament idea. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's great listen. And if you like that outre mystical stuff, you'll love it, So, yeah.
He can go anywhere. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a really good recommendation. Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Yeah. He's brilliant.
There you go. And hey, I will let you go with one more question. If you could give a new business owner one piece of advice, what would it be?
Get a W-2 job. No, just kidding.
Don't just say no. Just say no.
Just say no.
Just say no. Stay in Haiti. That's what I would say. Stay in Haiti.
Yeah. Oh man, you're talking about somebody that's just started a business, or
just started. Like all these people now who are like, hey, I'm a dog walker. I'm a mobile bike repairer. I started my, we got millions of people from the pandemic who have started new businesses, and all they know is I've got a way to make money. Now what?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think, Yeah, gosh, that's a really good question. I kind of fluctuated on that one too. Is one thing that's really key to me, and I tell this to anybody starting in real estate investing, and I think a lot of old dogs like it, like I said, because they like a cash flow. They like the idea that they could go on a vacation around the world, and that money is still coming in every month. They don't
Right.
have to do it. When I've had jobs where I didn't work, I didn't, I didn't
Yeah.
eat,
Yeah.
and stuff. So that's like that appeal is there, but one thing that's really important is that any business, you're going to encounter those really difficult times. And you have to know your why before you even get started. To me, that's critical,
Hmm.
because it's the why that keeps you going, really, especially when you're going through the real tough times. I've seen too many people that tasted real estate and they just, forget it, I'm selling the properties, I'm done. you
Right.
know but if you know your why and you have that motivation, for me, I mean, I see my own kids and I see being able to, to bless them in ways, I've got unmarried daughters. I want to give them the wedding of their dreams, all these
Hmm.
things, but I also see the face of those precious little kids in Haiti that we lived with for 12 years, that I want to see just go for their dreams.
Yeah.
And these kids, you could ask them, what's your dream? They don't understand that question, because their dream is, how am I going to stay alive today,
Yeah.
and to be able to see them flourish. And now, we've had kids, that are, they're college age and doing great and doing wonderful things, and it's so exciting to see. But I want to keep seeing that. And so that why, I have a strong motivator in my why, in that
Yeah.
even when things get tough, and they will, if you go into business for yourself, you're gonna,
Amen.
you know it's gonna get tough. You got to know your why. Got to know
Yeah.
your why.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think we all come to this for different reasons. A lot of people are motivated by family, and you do have to realize, the recession that we've got coming up will be my third full on recession
Wow.
in business. And then we had a couple minis in there when I came into the job market long ago and far away. And those are hard times.
Mhm.
And if you don't know why you're getting up and doing it every day, it's tough to it's tough to keep going. And I know as well that if that why is not really, really strong, and if it doesn't feed you outside of the results of the business, it can be hard to go on. I've got one friend and another person that I know who had businesses here in town who committed suicide this year,
Oh,
because
gee.
of the business, and a lot of other stuff going on. And that's a hard thing to look at from the outside regardless. And then you think, gosh, what an even harder agony to go through, to
Right.
be in that kind of place of despair. And being in business is hard work.
Yeah.
And there's not, you know regardless of whether you've got a safety net and cash flow, the real bummer is you don't have anybody else to blame. So you're like,
Exactly.
I did this to me.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I think that makes it hard. But when you have a why, um, the times when they're good, it's a real joy, and the times when they're
Mhm.
bad, it's an inspiration. So I think that is fantastic advice, and I really think something people need to keep in mind. Yeah. Well, Bill, we have used way more of your time than we said we would. You have been incredibly generous. Thank you so much. I will say, when we get this going, we'll have links to all your stuff, and love to send people to your podcast, because I've listened to a couple episodes. I thought they were great. And you may not have a voice for television, but you definitely do have a face for radio, so it works out good. Um, but no, absolutely, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I do envy these kids in Haiti who have you on their team. And frankly, I envy your tenants. There are a lot of folks in the game who are not at that point when they're going, hey, I'm creating a community here, and I need to make it work. So I think that's really great. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks for having me on. I can't thank you enough. It was just as fun hanging out with you.
Absolutely. Well, and we enjoy it. We're a marketing firm, and we have clients in a ton of different verticals. And when we sat down to start thinking about this podcast, I wrote down a list of everyone I knew personally who had owned a business for 10 years or more. And it was a
Wow.
long list. And I thought,
Wow.
they're all, I'm not friends with Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely or anybody who owns a brand, and I thought these are amazing stories and just wonderful people who are doing, what I consider to be the American dream, if you will, which is kind of setting your own destiny. Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.